Mike, I am curious about what you think happens next as far as what Mark Zuckerberg has to say, and get to the core of what the scandal really is here. I mean, Facebook's rules, their API rules, allowed for this type of data to be collected back when this happened, but this researcher collected ostensibly for non-commercial purposes. Was anybody collecting this type of data for commercial purposes back then?
Yeah, so this is the sort of problem that Facebook finds itself in right now. I've been talking to a lot of programmers and developers in the Valley over the past week since this dropped, and a lot of the practices that Kogan, this researcher, was doing totally abided by Facebook's what are called API platform rules for app developers who want to access user data pre-2015. So I think a lot of companies that had apps that use the Facebook platform in this way back then are sort of like nervously shifting around and looking at each other saying, like, when are they going to tell everyone that this was a pretty widely common practice? And then at some point,
it wasn't all researchers,
as you noted,
right? Some of it was companies that were trying to make money.
Absolutely. For-profit companies, startups, Facebook played pretty fast and loose with a lot of the user data for a long time. And only in 2015 did they start to realize that maybe we should tighten rules up a little bit.
Kevin, it seems like Facebook is almost like this toddler with superpowers. And people begin to realize, oh my goodness, it doesn't realize its own strength. We're looking years back, their judgment appeared to be really off on what the rules should be around these massive data stores. What do you think Mark Zuckerberg ends up saying that perhaps gets him and Facebook out of the crosshairs?
Yeah, so there is a playbook for this, and you go back to Johnson & Johnson, the early 1980s, the Tylenol cyanide crisis, and corporate America has followed this playbook subsequently pretty successfully. You look at General Motors, look at Pepsi and others who've done that. They're key ingredients of this. It's basically act quickly. You could argue that Facebook has not acted quickly. Take responsibility. Facebook has not taken responsibility yet on this particular issue, and then show that you're bringing transparency. What are you doing about it? Provide some more detail, and then actually hold yourself accountable. So what does this look like? It looks like maybe having an independent auditor or some kind of report. Facebook would much prefer to handle this themselves in that sort of scenario than to have US or European regulators or legislators start telling them how to handle this crisis.
Which they're about to do anyway.
Yeah, so this is an opportunity for Mark to actually step up. And what we've seen before is when the company has been mortally in danger, and we saw this with the shift from desktop, where Facebook was very dominant, to mobile, that Mark was able to mobilize the company and actually shift the company really dramatically and transformatively. Can he do the same thing about privacy now, given where Facebook is at?
And Mike, it's an interesting point, because perhaps the best way they could do this is to say, and maybe part of the reason they haven't been so out there on it is because this was kind of allowed back then. So Facebook has to defend something that it was doing as a business practice, but maybe now they can come out and say, you know what? We've changed our privacy standards already. This doesn't happen anymore. It shouldn't have happened in the first place. And they can wrap themselves in the mantle of privacy, almost akin to Apple or something like that. Would that work?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think Kevin's sort of points on how you would normally handle a crisis like this are exactly right. And were they in, I guess, at their peak, top of their game, they'd be doing that right now. I think probably what's throwing them a little bit is the fact that, so the Times broke the story that the chief security officer planned on leaving and was clashing with some of the top management at Facebook over disclosure of some of this stuff last year, the year before. And so they're grappling with a few things. One, they have to sort of apologize for the lax approach to privacy, and then two, set the, at least appear that they want to be as forthcoming as possible, which it's kind of unclear to me if they actually want to be that forthcoming in a lot of what they're trying to do right now.
Kevin, as much as we would like to say, as you have said, that they should come out, take responsibility, say essentially we're going to do whatever it takes, we also look at these other situations, let's say Wells Fargo, let's say Equifax, when they came out with one version of what they thought was the problem, and then later on it just kept coming out in waves of worse violations or something more to the story, and the CEO, and we all said, why didn't they have their story straight before they came out? So how should they approach that?
Well, I think that's presumably what Facebook has been grappling with. They're trying to get their heads around this and be able to communicate about it in a way that gives people confidence. But this is happening within the backdrop of 12, 16 months of loss of confidence in Facebook, dating back to the election, the fake news, the Russian manipulation there. And so Facebook has not, over that period of time, actually given particularly regulators and legislators confidence that they are on top of it, and it's become super acute with this episode. I would say one thing is that as a user of Facebook, core to the issue here is that apps that your friends installed could collect data about you. There are user settings in Facebook, which I went into myself yesterday to turn off for myself. They're under the little arrow in the top right of Facebook, and you go in, and my settings were checked so that I was allowing apps that my friends were using to still collect data about me. Mike, even though it's cracked down on the practices that still exist.
Right, and Mike, that's why I'm wondering, is this in effect Pandora's box that Facebook opened years ago, and they can't, if they close it, the damage is still done? I mean, John Fort in 2018 is not really different from John Fort in 2014. If my information got out back then, and as you say, there are dozens, hundreds, thousands, who knows how many app developers were gathering data this way back then, could Facebook continue to have problems like this month after month forever?
I think this is why, no, I totally agree, and I think this is why they get kind of caught off guard when privacy scandals sort of blow up like this, because this is how they've operated for years, right? And so when all of a sudden people start to understand how Facebook uses your data, how they collect information, and how some of, like Kevin was pointing out, how some of these things are turned on by default, I think there's probably like a private sort of meeting in management when they're like, haven't we told people this for a very long time? Like, if they've not been reading the manual or something. So it's hard to craft
because we all read those manuals so closely. Yeah,
yeah,
something
exactly.
buried. Of course. Oh, yeah. Whatever I agreed to when I signed up in the excitement of finding people. Sure, like I check back on that. The last thing I was just going to say, though, as well, is that if this is something that we talked to the analysts last hour on it, they said, we don't think it's going to affect advertisers. We don't think it's going to affect the business model. We don't even think it's going to affect users. Are we magnifying, Kevin, this whole issue more so than it is for Facebook?
Well, I think there are a few things that are risk for Facebook. We surveyed our readers last year, and only 20% of Quartz readers, and this mirrors other polls, have confidence, trust Facebook with their private data. That's a big issue for their consumer base. Obviously, regulators and legislators, that's also a problem. But if you were to shift off Facebook, if this would be a threat to the business, where would you go to connect with your friends? You might go to Instagram. You might go to WhatsApp. Both of those platforms are owned by Facebook.
And
so I think we're
connected
to Facebook and share data with Facebook and are connected to Facebook's advertising machine. And so I think we're several steps away from this being a really mortal threat to Facebook. But obviously it's one the company needs to take very seriously.
Yeah, move fast and break things. Sounds cute when it's a little startup saying it, but when it's an 800-pound gorilla in your house, a little bit different. Mike, Kevin, thanks.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.